Welcome to the Past Lives Cafe. I am your host, Keone, an intuitive energy worker and acclaimed past life regressionist. Come with me as we journey through the spiral of time to forgotten places. I am so happy to have with me today Kacie Knight. She is a spiritual teacher, alchemist, oracle, activator, and leads deep soul level transformation, helping her clients unlock their soul gifts, activate their voice, and step into their soul mission. Thank you so much, Kacie, for joining me.
Oh, I'm so grateful for the chance to talk about some of my favorite things that honestly don't get talked about enough. So thank you for the invitation.
Perfect. It's no big stretch to see from the introduction that you are a spiritually minded individual. And I'm just wondering how you came to be such a light for those of us who are light workers and coaches. How did you get into the transformational and transmutational field? What led you there?
It wasn't really by conscious choice. I was just told this is what I'm doing, and I had to basically get out of my own way and do it. So I was given this evolutionary codex before I came here to Earth, basically to help humanity right now during this massive transitional time. And there was a mystical experience that I had when I was just 8 years old, where spirit came and engulfed me with this beautiful divine light. And it was just peace, love, that beautiful energy, and showed me that I was going to be a spiritual teacher with a global mission. And it was very much at that time, because I'm 42, so terrifying because that meant that you'd have to be famous, famous to have a global mission because there was no internet. There was nothing like we have right now. Even though it felt very, very loving and very peaceful, it scared my ego so much because I was just in a Catholic school. I'm like, I know what they do to spiritual teachers. It's not good.
They
I
forgot,
just
they forgot to factor in the human side of us.
Right? They did. I had just watched Jesus in a movie be nailed up on a cross in grade two, and I was like, that does not seem like an end I want to meet. I don't know if they're still doing that, but it just activated this fear. And I was like, what? Me? No, no, no. You got the wrong kid. I'm just a kid. Who am I? And the divine just kind of laughed at me. I was like, when you're an adult, it'll all make sense. I was not in an environment in my childhood where I felt like I could tell anybody. So I just kind of shoved that down and ignored it. But I was always connected. I was always talking to ghosties and spirits, and I had more of that awareness. So I was kind of, I hate the phrase like I was kind of born awake. I didn't have like a spiritual awakening, but I had to spend my time getting enough of the healing and the support that I needed to basically move out of that fear of
Hmm.
showing the divine connection and the gifts that I had inside of me. So that was just my journey. It was a reluctant dragging into the work that I'm doing today that included a lot of healing and a lot of stabilizing myself to feel safe enough to come out and share.
Did you stop a corporate type job and then just kind of flip a switch?
Now I realize the global mission part in the age of the internet, absolutely so much easier, right? So I've already done that part, but it was just something that I had in the back of my mind. But
Hmm.
I just went through life kind of shoving it down and forgetting about it and learning everything that I could about people, about spirituality. I would just obsessively learn about what made people tick, psychology, sociology, anthropology. I studied it all. And I thought I wanted to be a teacher or a professor because that way I could still be doing the spiritual work, but in an
Hmm.
academic way that felt very safe and like it would make sense. Now, I didn't wind up going that route because I realized once I was in my third or fourth year of my undergraduate degree in anthropology that it's actually a very, very small box that you have to play in. And I knew that would not fit me. I didn't want to have to fight to put forward a new idea. I was like, they are too square. I'm like, oh, maybe instead of just being a teacher, I'll be a healer, I'll be a therapist. And I tried to go the Masters of Social Work route to be able
Mm-hmm.
to help people that way. But the universe kept going like, nope, not this, nope, not that. And so I worked at a dinner theater for years as a manager, and I just had a lot of fun doing that. And I got to experience and explore my life until I broke an ankle. And then I
Ooh,
realized that the thing that was killing me that I wasn't doing when I had this broken ankle was this big wake up call was that I actually love to dance so very much. That was where I felt my most aligned and spiritually connected. And I was like, maybe I should do something like that with my life. And I went on a journey at the ripe age of 28 to become a professional dancer and dance teacher. But it was in a very roundabout way because I became a hula hooper and a ecstatic dance facilitator and created my first business teaching
gotcha.
people mastery and spiritual connection through movement.
That is possibly one of the most in your face, life changing moments that I have heard in a long time. We talk about having intuitive hits, being led, having an actual break and saying, hey, then literally having to stop what you're doing enough to take time to realize, okay, this is my wake up call. I'm sorry it had to happen to you that way, Kacie, but I thought for sure you were going to say that you were acting in the dinner theater or directing because this sense that people would get around you, at least the sense I have, is I want to listen to you. I feel like what you have to say is important. And you have a way of communicating that not a lot of people do. I was surprised to hear that you were managing it, but that makes sense because you were getting to know people and understanding what their motivations are and essentially how to work together.
Absolutely. And I have since pivoted from being a professional hula hoop teacher and retreat coordinator and healer into being a spiritual coach, teacher, and things like that that include a lot more of that management, both for my team, but also with my clients. Everything when I look back was like, oh, yeah, I needed that skill. I needed that skill. Even though my path seemed really random, where I am right now, looking back, I'm like, well, all of it was perfect and divine, of course.
Yes, the threads of each of those pieces, while they may appear random, really provided you with that foundation that you needed to move forward. Perfect. How many times do you hear people say, oh, I jumped around on my resume, but I know I'd be perfect for this job? And it's telling the story of why those things made you or will make you a perfect fit. Perfect. I love that. We are here to understand your experience, not just facilitating past lives and in between lives, but also experiencing them for yourself. I am really fascinated to hear about some of your most poignant stories, either leading or experiencing. And then I do want to touch on the in between lives piece because I think a lot of people may not be familiar with that. And I will say, when I was interning as a QHHT practitioner, that was one of the first experiences I had. Now, looking back, I'm just thankful that I had that experience. I'll turn it over to you. Tell us what have been your most poignant experiences and the impact that that's had on you, especially as a spiritual teacher.
There are so many different pieces of this. I am a very multidimensional person, and my level of spiritual understanding was always that I was more than just a human. I was the kid that looked up at the stars and was like, I remember that. I watched Star Trek and be like, I missed that. So I was always connected, not just to past lives, but I would get these flashes even as a kid. I'd read about Egypt and I'd be like, I feel like I've been there, or I would, see an image of a desert that feels so familiar to me. So I had that piece, but I also been an alien, not just in that way of I'm different and people don't understand me, which was maybe a part of it, but literally remembering that this planet was not the only place I'd ever been and that there were other places with different rules that made so much more sense to me and that I remembered on this mostly subconscious level that I was here to remind us of other ways of living because the earth life did not make sense to me.
One question about the alien memory. Obviously, those of us in the spiritual world have an understanding that time as we know it is a construct that allows us to kind of put our arms around it, manage it in the space that we're in today. But one of the things that I struggle with as far as characterizing a past life regression is not all regressions are backwards from the chronological standpoint that we recognize. And I have had people who have very clear experiences in the cosmos looking down on Earth. I'm making this a short story, but flying around in something that looked like a pod of some sort. Sounds like the Mandalorian, but that's kind of what it sounded like to me. And having that experience of saying, I know that place, I've done work on that place, and now I need to go home. So, what is your idea, the time being a spiral or the regress versus progressing into the future as far as our connection with aliens? We tend to think of it as a futuristic type of connection.
My conceptualization of time is that we perceive it as linear, but it's really more flat and all happening all at once when you go up to the highest self perspective or the source perspective. And I work with my highest self and source energy all of the time. So it's like when you really zoom out and you're able to look down from the highest self, you can see past, present, and future all happening simultaneously. And also, we get very complicated when there's multiple iterations of it and different timelines and different things that gets a little mind warping. But because you can zoom out beyond everything in creation to the pre-creation energy, it feels like you can remember the future, you can remember the past, and also getting even weirder, what you do in the now moment can ripple out into either direction. And you can heal things and clear things in both directions of time. So a lot of the future memories that I have feel like they are literally remembering the future or the future potential. The alien stuff is interesting because, yes, I remember and feel future alien lives, but actually, most of them in the linear sense would be more past lives because they might be millions, billions of years old.
That's fascinating. I was studying reconnective healing. Don't know if you're familiar with it, but the premise is I can send healing energy based on just tapping into universal frequency of light, data, and information. And I can send that energy out. And it has the ability to impact people through different timelines and in different locations because, similar to what you're saying, there is no specific timeline. When we think about a world frequency, it has the ability to reach all different places, all different dimensions simultaneously. And so we should not, in reconnective healing viewpoint, think about time and space as being an obstacle to us. And I think just from that small example, if we take that into the memories standpoint, how many children say, "Oh, you're not my dad. My father works for the Navy and he was in a fire and went down with the ship," or have these very vivid memories. We don't know what often to do with that and question whether they're really remembering something or whether it's an imagination, construct. And so the fact that we can be in all places at all times, because those things don't really exist, I think is mind warping. But you're remembering being futuristic in our terms and living in the past is just that. Tell me one of your memories, or as many as you want, that you have from that, because I just think that's amazing. And I think instantaneously of Atlantis.
I know that there was an aspect of me that was here during Atlantis and also Lemuria. I tend to come to Earth when there is going to be a shift in consciousness. I really am at like a transition and rebirth expert. So that is when I'm hanging out and have remembered these beautiful times. And actually, Lemuria is coming to mind more, where we had this less dense physicality even though we were here on the planet in a physical form, it wasn't as solid. And there was this really beautiful heart-centered connection that people had where you could feel each other's energy and the energy of the earth so clearly. And there was this co-creation energy. And it is, to my current self, it feels very like kumbaya, everything is perfect in some of those memories because people were just so deeply honoring and reverent of each other and the world, and we worked together. That it seems to me like a fantasy. But I've recently been working with some of my clients to connect into some of those Lemurian frequencies that still exist inside of the earth and working with some of those technologies. I was doing that yesterday with a client who also had a life in that time, and we were actually able to use Lemurian frequency technology to do some health restoration for her that felt like home. Our souls remembered how to do it.
That is fascinating. So many of the perspectives I've read about people and from people who have tapped into that Atlantean and Lemurian experience have mentioned that the technologies that existed during, and again, we say time is a construct, but during that time was so superior to anything that we can fathom that often people on the outside, archaeologists, anthropologists, studying the sites at what they believe used to be Atlantis, can only come to the conclusion that something out of this world or otherworldly could have been leading some of these things. Can you talk about how that frequency does healing and the communications that you experienced?
The thing that I would like to share that I remember and understand about Lemuria and Atlantean civilizations is first off, the Lemurian one was actually low tech in terms of physical technology, and it was much more heart technology and things that we would perceive to be more like psychic experiences, working with sound, working with intention and breath. And it was much more focused on the divine feminine embodiment experience of beingness. And the Atlantean technology was more physical, though they did also bring in the mental focus and working with crystals and these technologies that would be so advanced that people would say it's magic, right? But it's just advanced technology that works with quantum physics and intention to activate. And when scientists are looking at some of those remaining things and they're saying they're off-world technologies, they're not wrong because at that time, there was all of these off-world connections with all of these different civilizations that were coming to Earth. Sometimes they were incarnating into Atlantean Lemurian souls from all over, whether that's Pleiadians or Andromedans or what have you. But also, we literally had visitation at that time where aliens would come and they would hang out. You couldn't just say, like, oh, it's just from Earth, because a lot of people were retaining a lot of their off-world technology memories as well. Somebody who was born a human in that Atlantean time could be like, oh yeah, this is how we did it in the Pleiades, and they could do that kind of technological engineering as well. So it doesn't make sense to the human archaeologist who is not thinking at that scale.
Yeah, that is beyond comprehension, which I think is fascinating that science has lack of understanding and be willing to say that, whether it's with quantum physics as a theory or looking at archaeological digs and saying, okay, this does not compute as far as when we think that a specific civilization existed. And I just have to share this. I have a friend who is extremely stoic and skeptical, and unless it can be proven without a doubt, then he is just very skeptical about it. And that's fine. That's his criteria for evaluating. And he's also in the medical profession. So he's a little bit reserved with regards to jumping into something experimental or that didn't have clinical trials. So I completely understand that, especially in our litigious world. But he said that he visited what was believed to be the Atlantean site on vacation not too long ago. And he said, had you asked me a year ago if I believed that Atlantis even existed, he said, I would have told you no. But he said the examples that they had from the artifacts gathered of the ability to even cut a brick that had been handmade with, they presume, had been a rope, and having people work together to cut a handmade brick with rope so that it was plumbed straight. He said, you can't tell me that when we think about people from former ages, that isn't something either divinely energized or otherworldly energized. If it was so otherworldly, I would hope that they would use something a little bit more cutting edge than a rope. However, the point is obviously that we took a hardcore skeptic who questions everything and was faced with actual artifacts from a civilization that they question and saw the ability to build and create, as you mentioned, things that we can't even maybe get right 100% today with automation. I think what you're saying makes total sense in a mind blowing way.
Yeah, and we're in a time of great revelation where all of these truths are going to start to be evident, and we're going to have more physical evidence. And I think over the next 7 to 10 years, people who have been waiting to believe are going to get to because they're like, oh, it's right here. I mean, you can see all of these things shift over time as well, where I don't know if you recall, but back in the 80s and 90s, someone who believed in aliens was portrayed like Mulder in the X-Files as someone who was quite cuckoo. And now US Congress is saying aliens come from the ocean and everyone's okay. And they're like, right? It's just so much shift has happened, and it's really exciting because this is the time that I know I have been waiting for, that I knew was going to eventually come around. And it's so exciting. And people are having so many revelations, whether it's from past life regressions or just spontaneous memories that are coming through as the veil between all of these different dimensions is thinning. So this is a really fun time to be alive.
When you have been leading a regression, or as I call it, just an incarnation, not to presume that we're always going backward, right? That's why I kind of don't like that term for that reason. But for purposes of our discussion, when you've led regressions, what has surprised you? What have you noticed? Any threads or any specific constructs that continue to pop up?
I have decided to not put people into regressions where they're in a full reclining hypnosis experience because I work specifically with healers and I want to show them how to do the multidimensional work that I do. And I like for them to not check out and be so relaxed. And so I use techniques where people are sitting upright and we go into a sacred space and we do go into that very deep subconscious or superconscious connection place. The way that I work is more like guided meditation where we are connecting in. And I think one of the most interesting things that comes forward for me is that most of the people that are here to do work with me are actually really deeply connected to Gaia, the consciousness of this planet. And she has been waiting to talk to them, waiting to connect to them in this very much not like, I am Mother Earth and I'm really angry about the way humanity's treated me, or I'm here to comfort you. Hundreds of people at this point, they are here as co-creators. And she is like, hey girl, do you remember we have work here to do together and we are supposed to be shifting the experience of people on Earth? You and I came before we came here and we had this plan to play and create. And the fact that you are trying to do it alone is absolutely nuts. You're holding the weight of the world on your shoulders and you weren't designed for that. It is weighing you down and put it down, put down the boulders, put down the burdens, put them down, give them to me. I was designed to do that. And she is like, could you please start interacting with me as a, not a guide, but like as a co-creator? I will help you reconnect to more of your multidimensionality. She can show us relevant past lives and help us bring forward gifts and wisdom from it. She's got basically this cave where all of our past lives on this planet are stored, but she can also do so much multidimensional magic with people that they are just ready to unlock. So that has been the greatest commonality and thread that comes through everyone that works with me who happens to usually identify as a star seed or someone who's from off planet.
That is so powerful. We tend to think of Gaia as a thing, a thing that holds our buildings, that holds us in place, that springs forth trees and crops, as opposed to thinking of this Mother Earth as frequency, as energy, and as an intelligence, really, because that's what you're saying. We're working together, in your case, with your clients, working together with that intelligence to co create.
Mhm. And it was planned from even before the physical Earth was created. Not exact, it hasn't gone according to plan, but because we can work outside space and time, we can even make new plans with her. So that is the most interesting thing to me because a lot of, again, the people that come to work with me, they might have never felt like they fit in on Earth. They might be longing for home, like some people who have more interplanetary lives than Earth lives. And it is this really beautiful remembrance that they came here with this energy and they were invited to be here. They were asked to be here. They chose to be here. And it gives them so much power back.
That does sound not just empowering, but welcoming. You are wanted. I'm sure you have met folks who just don't want to be here. As you said, they're longing for home. I can think of just off the top of my head some people who, if they could return tomorrow in some way, a lightning strike, they would say, sign me up. I love that you've reframed that because you're not here as a punishment. You're here in your teaching as a part of the solution. Not that there has to be a problem, but I think we know what I'm saying here, that we gather together and join our frequencies together and co-create where we need to go next, as opposed to feeling like you've been chained here, pushing that boulder up the hill and then it rolls back down the next day. I just love that.
There are a million problems on this planet, and I personally believe and understand that the separation from source and our multidimensionality and each other and all of that, that frequency of separation is the root cause of these problems. But it was always the point. Gaia was a free will zone. She wanted to do this grand experiment of ascension in physical form, and we were all like, hey, let's come and try. And it was designed, this Earth, and there's been several iterations of them and several different timelines. So it gets a little confusing. So if someone has different memories, sometimes it's from different iterations, but it was to be this living library where we could all come from around the galaxy or the multiverse to incarnate on the same planet and exchange codes. And there was supposed to be growth and fun and learning, but we decided we wanted to learn what it felt like to be self-focused. And that started to really happen during those Atlantean times, where people started to focus more and more on their individuality and their individual self, which is a valid exploration for infinite fractals of source that we are to do. It's interesting to explore, but that had us descend into the madness and the separation and all of the crap that has happened in a way that was a little unexpected. It was not in the big plan. And so we've had to really crawl frequency wise out of the hole, the crater that was created from a lot of the Atlantean exploits. And we are finally at the threshold where we are going to be shifting our frequency enough that the whole planet will remember our multidimensionality. We will remember who we actually are, and we won't feel that separation that's caused so much pain and drama in the density. So it's a super exciting time, and Gaia is really wanting everybody who has this part to play in solving the problems, because I do believe it is a problem. It's not the way we would like it to be. It doesn't feel good anymore. We're done exploring it. And she's like, remember, you don't have to do it alone. Again, like you said, it's not a punishment, but it is this great opportunity for you to be part of this transition.
And that, in and of itself, is an empowering reframe of what, if nothing else, not that it's not grandiose enough goal or life purpose, but if nothing else, to be here and to help create that shift. I love that. I love that. How many people are struggling with their life purpose or wonder, what is it that I'm supposed to do here? I'm not important. I don't feel important. In terms of past life regression, QHHT way is to drop in as deeply as possible without sleeping. The idea is to move the ego out of the way. You're essentially doing that without having to go that deep. That level of awareness remains. And I really like that approach. And while QHHT does rely on that deeper level of meditative state, it doesn't mean that if you're not at that level, that it's any less successful. And you're a perfect example of how you handle your technique of having people drop in. They're not almost asleep. They're very aware of what's happening. I'm curious to hear what you think, Kacie, but maybe we don't need to move our egos out of the way. Maybe we're consciously awake enough to not need to go that route.
I work in sacred space and I create a ceremonial induction into coherence where instead of moving the ego out of the way, we're bringing the highest self and that connection in the earth and the heart and the body and the mind and the soul all into coherence so they can work together as one. And a lot of people do reach that theta wave, but it is a practice that I work specifically with people who've already done a bunch of healing. They are not beginners. This is more of a like an intermediate to advanced technique because I'm sure that you know you don't need so many steps. So I designed what I really wanted to do, which is get to those other states in a faster way. And I also work by going into the heart, which is an infinite portal to the infinite multiverse, basically, and work through the body instead of going up and out. And that allows us to be more conscious and access all of these states. But it is a little different than hypnosis because what I'm typically doing is not regressing people for the sake of just activating memories. I do evolutionary alchemy, which is my modality, to clear out old stuff and also bring in soul remembrance and activation, working with the DNA or other things, working with the luminous team. And it's very, very co-creative. So when people go too deep and it's a group experience, because I do both groups and individuals, some of them who are not ready to be able to consciously do that, they will go into that deep hypnagogic state and fall asleep. And that is totally fine. They're just needing to have it all happen subconsciously. But for the person who is at that level of personal power to explore the multidimensional realms and has probably done a lot of guided meditation and hypnosis, then this is like a playground where we can play with them and be able to do more work in it without it being a passive process. I like to involve people and, again, teach them how to do these steps themselves so that they can walk themselves through it instead of needing a practitioner.
I love the characterization between the alignment and coherence between the ego, the super conscious, the higher self, the id, the yin, the yang, whatever the terminology is that brings it all together. I just love that. And I can feel it, that sense of wholeness within oneself. And then, if in a group with each other as well. I don't know about you, Kacie. My intuition and clairvoyance, clairaudience is always on overdrive if I'm with like minded people who are just holding space for that type of connection. So I can imagine how powerful that must be.
It's really fun. And because when we have that group energy field, just like we used to do in Atlantean and Lemurian times, we would have to do this work in a circle together. It amplifies the
Yep.
energy so much. And then we also bring consciously in the luminous team, our guides, our friends, our, multidimensional aspects to amplify it too. So people who normally aren't very clairvoyant or clairaudient are like, whoa, I am seeing stuff. And the really fun part is that I just let myself, and I teach people how to do this, to basically not be the guide. I let the highest self of myself and maybe a group field guide, and I'm like a narrator telling people what's happening. And the best thing that happens in every group situation is people say, I was seeing what you were saying before you were saying it. And people are like, yeah, me too. And it's like, yeah, because we were really there. And it gives people this confidence in
Right.
their own abilities and that it's real. So
Right.
people who, like your friend, are very skeptical, they haven't had experiences like that where they feel the energy and they see it. I feel for those people. I could not imagine. I feel like they're kind of cut off from feeling and seeing and knowing energy, which to me would
Right.
be like being blind or deaf, to be perfectly honest, because I've always felt and sensed it. But for those of us who can see it and feel it, we know that it feels more real than our human experience.
It feels more real and it's nothing you can touch. You
Mhm.
just feel it, which is the irony in it, but the power is there. I agree with you. It sounds beautiful.
The other piece that I find can sometimes be missing in traditional hypnosis and even QHHT and other life between lives experiences, the way that I work it too is that we reconnect to the divine current of energy that's supposed to be running through us all the time, which is part of what powers all of this. But it comes with this feeling of divine love that is so healing and so profound because it fills that void of everything that's been missing in our hearts when we've been feeling separate. And so that feeling is, I think, the thing that really changes people and helps them reconnect with everything else too, because it just brings us into that wholeness you were saying. And it is the thing that is unmistakable if someone is ready for it, right? If their heart is open for it.
It sounds like nirvana.
It literally is. I don't really advertise this when I'm say,
I
wanting to
will.
teach people my practices, and I like want to be a practitioner of evolutionary alchemy. I can teach that and all this. I haven't led with that, but it does bring you into states of bliss and reconnection with the divine that literally make you sometimes weep. Your eyes will be leaking with the love that you are experiencing, that your soul is like, oh my God, this is home. Oh my gosh, this is what Earth has felt like it's been missing, which is that feeling that most people feel where they don't feel like they're at home. It's because they're missing that. Most planets, you can feel that all of the time. But because of the density here on Earth and the trauma that we've experienced here, we get cut off from that feeling until we do a lot of that clearing and restoration.
We had talked about kind of defining what we mean by lives between lives. I spoke to my interesting experience with someone who realized that they weren't anywhere in particular, but waiting for the next life. I'll put it that way. But I want to hand it to you and understand what your experiences have been, how you've handled that with either your clients or yourself in understanding. It's a very esoteric experience to have.
It is, and it also is one of those things where it makes everything make sense. And when you are in that state, you're like, oh yeah. Oh, yeah. So I have to preface with my first awareness of it was actually through reading Dr. Michael Newton's Destiny of Souls and Journey of Souls. And I was in my late 20s at the time, and I'd done a lot of spiritual work. And I was reading it, and I go, yeah, but there's more. Like, dude, you're just scratching the surface. And it was all of these like memories were coming through. And I'm like, he is missing like a lot of the good stuff, a lot of the extra stuff. And I was like, I think I need to do one of these. And I found a regressionist who worked with the life between lives stuff, not the QHHT, but more of that Dr. Michael Newton experience, and worked with her. And when I did this beautiful 3 hour experience, we started in a past life and went after that moment of death. And personally, I just like floated up. I knew where I was going, which did not surprise me because it's not my first rodeo really on this planet or other places. And when I got to that space in between lives, I had lots of experiences that were classic ones that were in the books, right? I met with my counsel and with some people who had been in past lives and spirit guides, and I was shown some other things, including what I do when I'm not working on being on this planet or a little piece of it. And one of those things was me just like pushing around giant swaths of energy in the cosmos. And they were like, that's going to make more sense later. And I just had these beautiful experiences. And when I returned, it was as though that really like opened up the doorway that never fully closed after having that experience. And my multidimensional awareness and memories and ability to work with energy just exploded from there. And more has come in since. And now I can remember and go and explore and do things without needing to be in that full hypnotic regression.
I love that, especially when we have an experience that we have an expectation about what that experience may bring us. But when it happens to turn that key
Mhm.
and open up your heart, your soul, your consciousness to all that you never even imagined you would be able to feel and see at that time, is it's life changing. And I can imagine that that helped you put together this amazing program that you have for your clients. I mean, I want to have that experience. Give it here.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, though, I will say, it expanded everything, but it was actually such a validation for me
Right.
because, again, in those states, it feels more real. It's like hyper real versus this
Hmm.
human reality. And I was like, all of these things that I have been thinking and remembering, I had this very physical evidence of from, my soul age and experiences and connections with my councils and guides and things to other things that, were more interplanetary experiences. So for me, it was just like I was not making it up, even though I know a skeptic could be like, well, you could just be making it up more because you were deep in your subconscious. I don't care. It is one of those feelings that is so real that there is no part of me that was like, I was just making that up because it is such a not a faith thing anymore. It's this knowing, it's this deep embodied experience.
I always say it's impossible to prove something isn't real. So
Mhm.
it's hard to prove something is not or did not happen. It's much easier to prove that it did. And so for skeptics, they're just going to have to continue to explore their own skepticism and other experiences.
Mhm. I also discovered that a lot of the people who were working with someone like Dr. Newton were
Hmm.
people who were, he didn't have as many of those interplanetary souls or star seeds or whatever. He had a lot of who you could characterize as maybe younger souls who are
Hmm.
confused about Earth life. And that's one of the reasons he got to the level of knowledge and awareness that he did, because a lot of people aren't ready or privy or aware of some of the different frequencies that you can also
True.
experience and explore.
Good
So
point.
it was just very much a jumping off point. And like he doesn't even get into that life between lives way station that's like classrooms and talking to your councils and guides is actually, as far as I understand it and remember, it's actually through the Arcturian Stargate. And you're working with a lot of Arcturians and other interplanetary souls who are supporting and guiding humanity at this time. That's not even mentioned in some of that work.
There's just so much to tap into. Anyone that wants to reach out to you, I know that you have a website, kacieknight.com/links. How else should someone who is seeking your incredible wisdom, but also your non judgmental acceptance, which you can feel it even over my laptop? Who doesn't want to have perfect love and then work with someone that makes us feel that way? How should they reach out to you? And this will be in the show notes as well.
There's lots of places to connect. My multidimensionalness wants to be everywhere, so they can check in on the Infinite Evolution podcast. They can connect with me on Facebook or Instagram or Threads or TikTok or YouTube under the Luminous Evolution. And I would just invite them to stay in touch because I will be creating a new app and community there. It's not quite ready yet, but we'll have a space where people can connect off of the social media apps so we can have some more very real discussions without fear of people who might censor us or not get it being around or involved.
Oh, I love that. I can't thank you enough. And I am so honored that you accepted this invitation. And I feel like I've known you all my lives. I'm definitely hoping you'd be willing to connect with me again, either on Past Lives Cafe or the Mystical Mermaid Lounge, where we literally dig into everything spiritual for seekers all over the world.
I would love to. I feel that soul resonance, and it's my favorite part of right now as well. We are all being reconnected, and that is just so glorious. I know the political state of the world is chaotic, but for those of us who came here to be part of the transition team, there is just so much magic and connection and divine energy supporting us that it is, yeah, just my favorite thing to reconnect with people who are here doing this work, just like we'd always planned to do. So thank you for having me. I'd love to keep chatting.
Thank you so much. And guys, she is totally as inspirational as she sounds. Thank you, Kacie. I will be in touch. This concludes this episode of Past Lives Cafe podcast with Kacie Knight. If you or someone you know would like to discuss your past lives experience on the podcast, please reach out to me at keone@quantumjourneygo.com. Finally, please check out the Mystical Mermaid Lounge podcast, a safe space for all spiritual seekers, which I co-host with Chloe Brown. And remember, while we can't relive the past, together we can heal it. Thank you so much for listening. If you are interested in my services, visit me at www.quantumjourneygo.com or drop me a note at pastlivescafe.buzzsprout.com. Stay well and be present.